When you're booking a cruise, you're often able to choose the specific cabin that you'll be staying in. From selecting the right category, deck, and location, there's a lot that needs to be taken into consideration before making any decisions. One thing you'll have to think about is whether you want to be located in the forward or aft of the ship. Both provide their own set of pros and cons, and the best option is based on what you prioritize. Forward cabins, for instance, tend to have unique layouts, whereas those in the aft of the ship are typically located closer to dining venues. Though midship is often considered the ideal place, cabins here are often the most expensive since they're an equal distance from all the major amenities on board. In addition, midship is the best location for those who might be worried about seasickness. To avoid any surprises about your stateroom's location, here's a guide on whether you should choose an aft or forward cabin. First, we'll talk about the pros of forward cabins, and up first is forward cabins may have more unique layouts. On board Royal Caribbean ships, many ultra-spacious cabins are found at the front of the ship. These are ideal for families traveling together who want more living room space but don't want adjoining cabins. On board Oasis of the Seas, for instance, ultra-spacious ocean view rooms can be found at the front of the ship on deck 11. These cabins measure over 270 square feet and have space for 6 passengers, whereas standard ocean view staterooms can usually only accommodate 4. These are great for those seeking more space but don't want to splurge on a suite. Additionally, when I sailed on Carnival Vista, my junior suite was located forward on deck 9. The spacious cabin included a large balcony, walk-in closet, and an in-suite bathroom with a tub and double vanity. Another pro is that you may feel more secluded since there won't be a lot of foot traffic outside your room. Unlike staterooms located near the elevator banks or in the middle of the ship, you won't have a ton of guests wandering the halls looking for their cabin. Since there's typically nothing worth seeing at the front of the ship on passenger decks, the amount of foot traffic outside will be quite minimal. This is ideal for those who want to minimize the chances of being awoken in the middle of the night by rowdy guests. While this means that they're less convenient since you'll be having to walk further to reach certain amenities, they're usually cheaper than those in the midship, which is another advantage. Now let's talk about some of the cons of forward cabins. First, they tend to experience a lot of motion. Cabins in the forward of the ship often feel more swaying, making them less desirable for those who are worried about getting seasick. The front of the ship endures direct hits from the rolling waves, which results in more motion and sea spray. Typically, those on higher decks are more likely to feel intense motion. Plus, they're often more expensive due to the premium ocean views that they offer. For example, when cruising on Carnival Vista, I paid $3,600 for a junior suite that was located on deck 9. The rocking that my cousin and I felt in the room was worse than anywhere else on board. At times, the sensation resembled that of a roller coaster. Though the cabin came with some elevated perks, the intensity of the rocking was a major negative and would prevent me from booking the same room in the future. Moreover, there may be some instances in which the balconies are inaccessible due to the inclement weather, such as if the wind is too strong to make lounging outside enjoyable. In addition, some might be obstructed by the bridge. Beware of rooms located above the bridge, as it's likely they'll have obstructed views. Even if the bridge isn't in the way, ocean view rooms that face forward may have a view of the bow of the ship rather than a full view of the ocean. Some cruisers don't mind obstructed views though, especially if they don't plan on spending a lot of time in their cabin when they aren't sailing somewhere scenic such as Alaska or Norway. If you want to save money on your stateroom but still want access to natural sunlight, an obstructed ocean view room may be exactly what you're looking for. In addition, cabins that overlook the bow offer some pretty spectacular, albeit slightly blocked views, especially when you're pulling in and out of port. Sometimes they might even feature floor-to-ceiling windows. Another con is that guests on lower decks may hear the ship's anchor drop in port. Typically, anchors on cruise ships are found on lower decks near the front of the ship. If you prefer a quieter experience, you'll want to consider a cabin on higher decks, as those on lower decks might be disturbed by the sound of an anchor dropping into the sea. Since the lower decks are often reserved for ocean view and inside rooms, those who want a private balcony likely won't have to worry about this. Moreover, early risers who plan on beating the breakfast crowds will have already started their day and won't be disturbed by the noisy anchor. If, however, you prefer a more leisurely and peaceful morning, you'll want to avoid those cabins that are located at the foremost part of the ship on the lower decks. Now let's talk about pros of aft cabins, and up first is the amazing view that you'll have. Cabins found at the very back of the ship will have a view of the ship's wake trailing behind, creating an immersive and tranquil backdrop for sailors throughout the voyage. Those located on the port and starboard side of the vessel won't offer the same expansive views of the wake. One negative to this, however, is that many cruisers report being able to hear the ship's movement more. Of course, some may see this as an advantage, as it is essentially a natural white noise machine. If you have a port-intensive itinerary, you may have fewer opportunities to lounge on the private veranda and soak in this unique view. In addition, you'll have spacious balconies. In addition to the unique wake view, the balconies of aft-facing rooms tend to be larger than standard staterooms. Sometimes they may even feature lounge chairs in addition to or in place of basic chairs, making them ideal for those who prioritize sweeping views, privacy, and comfortable seating. On board Carnival Conquest, for instance, the aft-facing rooms measure around 245 square feet, including the balcony, whereas standard balcony cabins are only around 220 square feet. And now let's talk about the cons of an aft cabin. First, if you don't select a wake view room, you'll end up with the same cabin that's available in the middle of the ship, just with a further walk. Unless you're interested in a cabin with wake view, those located in the back of the ship will be similar to those found midship, which are more conveniently located. Like forward cabins, though, standard aft rooms are usually cheaper than those in the middle of the vessel, simply because they aren't as convenient. If you don't want to worry about hiking back to your stateroom each evening, we recommend not booking an aft cabin. In addition, though not as intense as the front of the ship, those located in the back aren't immune to feeling the rocking of the vessel as it glides through the sea. Forward cabins typically feel more motion than aft cabins. However, that doesn't mean that those in the back of the ship aren't still subjected to the swaying of the ship, especially if cruising in rough seas. As mentioned earlier, the ideal location for guests who are prone to motion sickness is midship, as it's where the effects are typically minimal. Additionally, passengers should elect for a stateroom on a lower deck. Though choosing a cabin at the aft of the ship may offer some stability advantages compared to those at the front, it doesn't guarantee a motion-free experience. Another con is that you may feel vibrations. Cruise ship engines are often found in the back of the ship, meaning that any nearby cabins, especially those on lower decks, might feel vibrations. This can cause the hangers in your closet to rattle, especially when the ship is maneuvering into port or operating at higher speeds, and you typically can feel this while you're in bed. You won't have to worry about too much noise from the engine itself, though, as ships are built with plenty of noise reduction technology. So what happens when you aren't able to select your own cabin? Most cruise lines like Royal Caribbean, Carnival, and MSC Cruises offer guarantee cabins that are cheaper than standard fares, which allow you to select your cabin. Choosing a guaranteed rate means that you forego the ability to choose your cabin in exchange for a cheaper rate. Guests who elect to book a guaranteed cabin are guaranteed a cabin in their chosen category. So if you choose to book a guaranteed balcony, you won't be downgraded to an interior cabin. The biggest risk, however, is that you could end up in a less than desired location, such as in the very back or front of the ship, underneath the Lido deck, and close to the nightclub. Alright everybody, that is all we have for today. Comment below if you prefer staying in the front or back of the ship and why. Also, be sure and like and subscribe to Cruise Blogs so that you can be notified every time we have a new video. Until next time, this has been Allie, and happy cruising.